Tracy and Mountain House residents. This is Gurtej, your host, and I have my co-host Parminder Sandhu today. And we have special guests Zach and Christina. We'll be discussing today about Measure X. Before we go into Measure X, I'll just put a disclaimer here. So from Six of Tracy, we are not endorsing or we are not against the measure. We are here to provide the information to the voters so that they can make an informed decision on November 3rd. So now I'll request Parminder to please briefly introduce him.
Hi guys, this is Parminder. So today we are here to discuss Measure X. So it is on ballot, and we want to discuss what exactly the Measure X is, and Zach and Christina will help us understand how this Measure X will work and what the benefits or pros and cons of this measure will be. So I'll read the Measure X disclaimer on the ballot. So it says. Supporting early childhood education and youth programs, including literacy, gang reduction, after-school programs, and drug prevention, with emphasis on children facing greatest disparities, and promoting public health, homeless mitigation, and enforcing cannabis laws. Imposing a special tax on commercial cannabis businesses in unincorporated San Joaquin County at a rate of 3.5% to 8% of the gross receipts, and including a $2 cultivation square footage payment be adopted. And the annual revenue estimate is, I believe it's at $250,000. And so this is the measure on the ballot, and we're going to talk about this, and I will hand it over to Zach to give us a brief introduction of this measure, and then we'll go from there.
Good evening, Gurtej and Parminder. First, I'd like to thank you both for the opportunity to speak to the community and having us on tonight. So very briefly, Measure X is a ballot initiative that, if it passed, it's going to impose a cannabis tax on all commercial cannabis businesses operating in the unincorporated county of San Joaquin. Currently, the Board of Supervisors has approved cannabis businesses. However, the way that the financial obligation for those cannabis businesses is administered is through development agreements, which means every commercial cannabis business that may be approved by the Board of Supervisors also has to negotiate its own terms for its financial obligations to the county. What Measure X would do, it would streamline the process for commercial cannabis businesses to be able to be approved without having to negotiate a contract with the county one by one. It'll create consistency across the board for the businesses that are approved in the county so that they'll all be subject to the same tax rates depending on the type of commercial cannabis business that they're operating. And in essence, it allows the county to take advantage of an activity that is already ongoing within its borders. The examples that I use are the city of Stockton, which is within the county's jurisdiction. It's had commercial cannabis regulations and has been approving commercial cannabis businesses since 2016. The state of California allows delivery direct to customers anywhere in the state of California from a licensed commercial cannabis retailer. And rest assured that there are cannabis consumers in San Joaquin County that are looking to businesses outside of our jurisdiction, and even within our jurisdiction, within the city of Stockton, to get their products. And the tax revenues associated with those transactions are all lost. Where those could be captured by county businesses, all of that tax revenue is going out of the jurisdiction, and Measure X would impose a tax on commercial cannabis businesses so that we could take advantage of this multi-billion-dollar industry, utilize that for enforcement of cannabis regulations, and most importantly, utilize those revenues to help those most in need. And Christina can expound upon that as far as the community benefit aspects of Measure X. But in sum, that's what Measure X will do.
Yeah. Thanks, Zach. Yeah. What happens with the revenue that's created is 50% of the money is put into a children's trust fund for children and youth preventative programming. And 50% of the money is for the county to spend on homelessness services, on public health, and on cannabis code enforcement. And so this is not an extra tax on cannabis, but what it is an opportunity to ensure that this new revenue in the county is dedicated to some really important challenges in our county. Right now, we would all agree that children even as you consider the impacts of COVID, are facing some really big hurdles. And this is absolutely a time we need to be investing more in our children and youth. For homelessness, we have a serious homelessness issue here in the county, and we need to be allocating as much money as we can to upstream investments and into our community and into those most vulnerable in our community. And so by taxing this new tax revenue and dedicating it way, ensure the money goes where it needs to go.
Thanks, Jack and Christina. So just to be clear for our audience, so this is an additional tax that will be imposed on the cannabis businesses, right?
Zach, go ahead.
I'll take that one. So the impact fees that are being negotiated currently under the development agreements essentially would be replaced by the cannabis tax. So the revenue would not be in addition to the impact fees that the county would collect under development agreements. It would be in lieu of. Now with that, in streamlining the process, it would make this venue a more attractive place to do business potentially for cannabis operators that are looking for consistency and fairness in the jurisdiction that's administering regulation.
And will it include every single cannabis business that will open in the county, or will there be any exceptions?
The cannabis tax will not approve any new type of uses. Currently, all aspects of the commercial cannabis industry, except for outdoor cultivation and retail storefronts, is allowed under the ordinance. So no outdoor cultivation, only greenhouses and rigid structures and indoor facilities, and no retail storefronts. However, direct-to-consumer delivery is currently allowed.
Thank you very much, Zach and Christina, for explaining us what Measure X really is. So now let's see, so why do we need this measure? Can you please explain why do we need this Measure X?
Absolutely, and I'll talk about that from community impact, and then Zach can talk to you about just business-wise why it makes more sense. But from a community impact, this is the better way to handle investing in our community. We know by looking at the tax that was placed on cigarettes, then they took that money and they invested it in education, and they reduced underage smoking by 50%. We know that taking an industry, regulating, taxing it fairly, regulating it, and educating has profound impacts in our community. So right now we have a ban in place on something that's already legal in the state of California that can be delivered to anyone's front door, and then I can grow 6 of them in my backyard, and we're capturing none of the revenue so that we are unable to do any of the education. And the beauty of this measure is also that the kids who smoke marijuana, which is really the more troubling issue with marijuana, right? The impact on brain development and IQ, we can educate and know that there is a large population that will respond to that and refrain. But in addition to that, kids who are smoking marijuana are also doing it because of mental health issues, because of trauma, because of all of these other issues that they're facing. This tax gives us the ability to intervene in that issue as well. So we're handling both sides. We're able to provide education as to why it's not safe for a young person to be smoking marijuana and a reduction in underage usage, and we're able to address the underlying causes of why they were smoking in the first place. Our community still has significant issues with child abuse, with children who end up in foster systems, with children who end up in juvenile court, with homelessness. And homelessness is made up of something like 20% of foster youth that have aged out of the system. So if we were able to move that money upstream and stabilize children and their homes and their families, you're going to see less children in the child protective services. You're going to see less kids homeless. You're going to see less homeless people down the line. And anyway, and this gives us the ability to have a local dedicated funding stream that we are able to allocate as we see fit. We have people who have been serving this community for 20, 30, 40 years, and they know what works. I can tell you, it is an absolute privilege of mine to work alongside and learn so much about Boys and Girls Club of Tracy, for example. They are a phenomenal program, and even right now I had the opportunity to talk to Kelly Wilson, how they're meeting the needs of kids that are most impacted by COVID right now, and the lack of opportunity for learning that they're facing, and just doing the most incredible work. But we have to fund them so that they can reach these children and these families, and they can make a difference for them. So that's why we have to find a way to expand our intervention in children's families upstream. Back.
And I have another question. When you talk about like the money will be used for the public health, can you like explain a little bit like how this money will be channeled and like how will this money be used for the public health for the youth?
The 50% that goes to the county, their bucket, they have to justify that it has to be spent on homelessness services, public health, or cannabis code enforcement. Those are the only three ways that this revenue can be used. I have no say over how it gets used. It just has to be justifiably spent on public health. I would assume that in the middle of a pandemic, it's likely that some of these funds would be used to purchase more PPE or be able to expand testing or some of those things. But that's really the decision of the county, and that's good because you want the county and you want the oversight committee for the children's fund to be able to respond to the current need, because this is a measure that does not sunset. So we want to build in the flexibility for our leadership and our community representatives to respond to what the current need is. So honestly, it would probably be whatever the most pressing need is at that given time.
But is there like any other, like for example, when we say like we have like multiple issues that we want to address from the money that's going to get generated out of this tax. So one is like a public health and also like it's a homeless mitigation. So will there be any check on the county officials, like how much money they can allocate based on like whatever the need is? Like is there any cap for every aspect of the money that they want to spend? So like for example, like will that be like a 50-50 or 60-40? Like what will be the check on the county officials?
So the only legal requirement for the county is 50% must go to the children's fund, okay, and 50% can only be spent on public health, homelessness services, and cannabis code enforcement. The reality of things like this is, though I know that I definitely would lean towards wanting to be even more scripted. It can only be, 15-15, whatever it's going to be. But we can't write so specifically, and it ties the hands of people to not be able to make decisions as time moves on. So really the way that we make sure the children's fund, that money is going to be, has an oversight committee called the Children's Services Coordinating Commission. That commission already exists. It has 25 people that sit on it that represent the entire county. You have to have a certain amount from Tracy, a certain amount from Lodi, a certain amount from unincorporated areas. And they meet together and they make decisions. And currently, they handle all of the money that the state gives counties for child abuse prevention. So this was really a natural fit. They set a 5-year plan based on the most impacted communities, and then they oversee those funds. And so this would be something that we would layer in there, and then they would have the same requirements, that it has to be the part of the measure state, that it has to favor children who are disproportionately impacted. So that's the safeguard we have for the children's fund. Honestly, as in all things, the watchdog is our ongoing advocacy. The citizens paying attention and listening and watching and being informed, and advocacy groups like myself, attorneys, and citizens like Zach, when our representatives know we're watching, and they'll have to account for the fact that maybe only 10% got put on public health, then we know that that's the best accountability we have beyond what we've scripted so far.
Sure. No, thank you very much, Christina. Now, just moving forward, so will this make cannabis or the medical cannabis more expensive?
Well, that's an interesting question. So, as you may know, commercial cannabis business is one of the most heavily taxed and heavily regulated in the entire state of California. From a product perspective, there isn't too much of a difference between quote unquote adult use cannabis and medicinal cannabis. It comes from the same plant. It's the same manufactured products. It really depends on the consumer's personal preference. Now, for medicinal cannabis patients, when you talk about price at retail, it's actually less expensive if you have a state-issued medical cannabis ID card, which very, very few individuals in California actually had, even before the passage of Prop 64 in 2016. Prior to that, and I won't go too far down the legal rabbit hole, prior to that, in order to legally shop at a medical cannabis dispensary, you had to have a recommendation from a doctor, you had to be a resident of California, and had to be at least 18 years old. What Prop 64 did, the Medical and Adult Use of Cannabis and Regulation and Safety Act, or ALMA rather, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, what that did is it said if a customer has a state-issued ID card, they're exempt from the 15% excise tax that's imposed on all other customers at retail. So if you have one of those cards and you're a quote-unquote medicinal cannabis patient, and that's not to underestimate the true medical need of some of the consumers, you actually pay less. Now, if you want to differentiate, there is still an allowance for medical cannabis patients and their caregivers to grow 6 plants, depending on what your local jurisdictions allows. You can either grow those outdoors, but by and large, most local jurisdictions require you to grow your 6 plants inside of an enclosed lockable structure on your property. And so you can provide cannabis to up to 5 medical cannabis patients as a caregiver, or if you're a patient yourself, you can grow up to 6 plants for your own medical use.
And in case of like just a random question, so like for example, when you say like a person can grow six plants, so will he or she need to like notify some county officials, or he can just grow it as a tomato plant?
Any person in California can grow 6 plants at their residence. 6
okay.
plants per residence, not resident with a T. That's important. I get asked that question a lot. If I've got 5 people living here, does that mean I can grow 30 plants? No, it doesn't.
Okay. And but like, do I have to like notify somebody that I have, or it doesn't matter?
There's a few local ordinances that impose like parameters around personal cultivation, as it's known. But as far as the state is concerned, no, there's no notification requirement. Again, how you grow your plants, you should really take a close look at your local jurisdiction, how they regulate personal cultivation, because many jurisdictions do not allow outdoor cultivation, even for personal cultivation. Now, you're going to see, especially around this time of the year, there are still a lot of illegal grows going on, and a lot of times those are not caught by law enforcement, unfortunately. But it is legal for every single resident of California, if you're at least 21 years old, to grow your own 6 plants.
Okay. Now, I think let's go back to the Measure X. So like we talked about the county officials, like who will be responsible for allocating the money out of this. So in case as a resident of San Joaquin County, so as a voter, so if I want to check like how these officials are using these assets, how can a person check that?
That's actually something that's really challenging, because county budgets are huge and they're really confusing, and that's really where an organization like the San Joaquin Children's Alliance comes in. My job is to be a watchdog. Sometimes I joke that the San Joaquin Children's Alliance is the union for children. It's our job to watch and see that the things that they set as a priority and said they would do, that they do. So really what we do is we have built a coalition of nonprofits and leaders across the entire county. And I watch and pay attention and inform those people. And then a lot of times when it's time for action, that information is pressed out through their agency. So, for example, Kate Ruthstaller is the executive director of Family Resource and Referral. And when it's time for us to do advocacy in front of the Board of Supervisors, because for Measure X or for how the Measure X money is being spent, I connect to those leaders, and those leaders send out newsletters and emails and social media posts letting their constituents know, and that's how we rally the troops typically. But really, I don't know about, maybe more people are watching now, but watch your Board of Supervisors meetings. They're every other Tuesday. You can find them online. I know they can get long, but if you watch them afterwards, you can skip through certain parts. Learn to read the agenda and check in. Follow the agencies that you're passionate about, and see what they're talking about. Because honestly, if government is not representing us well, it's because we're not watching. And so if you just watch, if you watch your city council meetings, if you watch your board of supervisors meetings, it takes time, but you will learn the lingo and the departments and how things work. And public comment is a huge tool to us, to bring your friends and your neighbors there and submit a card and step up and speak your mind on behalf of your community. You have power. It's just that by and large, we've abdicated that power, and now we don't know how to engage it. And really, just start watching the meetings. They're always online.
And another quick question about the public health, which is for especially for the children. Like, mental health has been like a big challenge in this world right now. So especially in the school-going kids. So will this money, like, which is also like for the public health, will there some funds be allocated towards like a mental health or towards the schools? Because a lot of this education needs to start at the school level. So will some of the funding will also go to the schools as well?
So the funding, again, the win is we've secured the funding and we've secured the oversight committee and we've secured that it has to be for children and youth and it has to be for children who experience the most disparities. Beyond that, it's not heavily scripted, and there's a reason for that. If you were to say it had to pay for preschool, what if in 5 years the state decides to pay for preschool for every child in the state of California? Now we have to take it back to the voters, and it's a huge undertaking to put something on the ballot and get in front of enough voters to get it passed. So you have to write it with enough accountability that there's some certainty that what you want to get done will get done. And yet it has to be written with enough flexibility to allow for it to evolve to what the current needs are. If I was to guess, I would highly suspect that something like mental health is going to rise very quickly to the top. And the people who will be awarded the grants, again, I will have zero control over that. This is this body of 25. It'll most likely be what it is for almost all grants. There's a process. There's an RFP process. You know, we want to do school-based mental health practices and services and programs, and all bodies would be invited across the county as long as you meet general requirements to apply for the grants and then deliver the services. So as far as I would understand it from right now, mental health, I think mental health is really everyone's top 3 concerns, period, across the board. I can't imagine it wouldn't float immediately to the top. And then beyond that, every entity that meets the requirements would likely be able to apply depending on what they're funding in that particular time period.
Thank you very much, Christina. So as this Measure X, it is very much tied to cannabis. So there's a question in the voters. So does Measure X legalize cannabis?
It does not, but I'm going to let Zach take that. That's really Zach.
Sure, I appreciate that, and I think it's the most important thing for your viewers to keep in mind is cannabis is already legal across California. I think something like 70 some odd % of the population has tried cannabis in their lifetimes. Could be more than that. I think around 40 to 50% of adults have used cannabis in the last 10 years. It is worth $20 billion in the aggregate in the state of California. The commercial cannabis market in the last few years, it's right around $5 to $6 billion. The state has kind of undershot its revenue projections in 2019, but those numbers are trending upward as more and more local jurisdictions allow commercial cannabis in their communities. Cannabis is here. Cannabis has been here for many years. What's new, what's novel about Measure X and other commercial cannabis regulations locally is that commercial cannabis businesses are now being treated as commercial ventures. So where, the former model in California that was in place since 1996 for, medicinal cannabis and cannabis collectives, those entities had to operate as nonprofits. And with that, there was no tax revenues being paid to any local jurisdiction or to the state whatsoever. So as the cannabis industry grew across California, serving not only consumers here, but when you're talking about, demand for California cannabis in other states, that's where we got to this $20 billion worth a year number in California. That's how much cannabis is produced here in California, and those numbers come from the CDFA. Cannabis is more valuable than the next 5 agricultural commodities combined. And so, it would be naive to say that, Measure X or any other local measure has legalized cannabis. California did that for us. They did it. The state legislature did that in early 2016. And then the voters in the state of California did that in 2018 when Prop 64 was passed, or rather 2016 when Prop 64 was passed. And so since that time, local jurisdictions with the dual approval requirement that California have the option to either regulate as stringently as a ban on commercial cannabis activities or as leniently as the state has dictated in their cannabis regulations. So cannabis is legal in California. Again, with statewide delivery, any cannabis business located in California can deliver direct to any consumer at a private residence or private place of business. So if you are a commercial cannabis business in the city of Modesto, like I have clients in the city of Modesto, you can legally deliver cannabis into the unincorporated county area to a customer there, and that tax revenue goes to Stanislaus County and not San Joaquin County. So by Measure X imposing a tax on these businesses here, it allows San Joaquin County to capture that revenue.
Thank you very much, Zach, for clarifying it. Yeah, so it is legal. Cannabis is legal. What Measure X is, it is safe to say that it is dealing how that revenue will be spent.
Yes.
So now just moving on. So as you mentioned, that it is legal and lots of businesses are involved. So what types of cannabis businesses will be allowed?
So there's various aspects of commercial cannabis industry. We have cultivation, okay? At large in California, you can cultivate outdoors, you can cultivate in greenhouses, and you can cultivate within greenhouse facilities or indoors. In San Joaquin County, the regulations dictate that there is no outdoor cultivation whatsoever. And for greenhouses, you have to have a rigid structure greenhouse, so like a polycarbonate structure, a hard plastic structure that you couldn't just cut through with a knife. So no hoop houses or anything like that. They have to be secure, enclosed, lockable structures where cultivation takes place. We also have distribution. So a distribution business is legally allowed to transport cannabis between licensees. So you have it grown at the farm and you take it to a distribution facility to be broken down into packages. The distributors are also responsible for contacting the lab testing facilities. So all cannabis that goes to consumers at retail has to be tested for pesticides, has to be tested for heavy metals, it has to be tested for other microbiological contaminants like mold, before it can be legally allowed to be sent to retail to the customer. So after the distributor has picked it up from the cultivation facility, has dispatched a sample for testing, receives a clean certificate of analysis from that lab, then that distributor can go on and distribute that product to the retailer. We also have lab testing facilities, as I just mentioned, and also retail businesses. So California, you can have a retail storefront if your local jurisdiction allows it, or you can have a delivery or retail with delivery. Here in San Joaquin County, there is only delivery allowed from a retail perspective, so no brick and mortar storefronts. Every other aspect of the industry is currently regulated here in San Joaquin County, albeit the financial obligations and the other administrative aspects of regulation are done through development agreements, which is a contract effectively between the commercial cannabis business and the county itself.
No, thank you very much, Zach. Now I'll take it back to Parminder to lead us further into the conversation.
Yeah. So so as you explain a lot of benefits of this the measure. So basically on the taxes and how it will be used. So do you know who is opposing this measure?
There is no organized opposition to Measure X. If you were to look into your ballot book, you would see an argument in favor, and there is not even an argument against that's been filed. Honestly, this is such a common sense approach to a legal industry that is going to help us derive a significant community benefit that it's hard to come up with strong opposition arguments. It's done. It's legal in California. There are already businesses being opened up in the unincorporated areas. There are already businesses in Stockton, and the significant fears of what would happen when those businesses open in Stockton have not manifest themselves. And so as a children's advocate, I can sit back and say, we can regulate and control this in a way that I feel comfortable. As a mom, I feel like this is a better way to do this. I think as parents, we all know it's better to talk to our kids and educate our kids than just say no all the time. And as a citizen, this is just better governance. This is a better way to handle an industry. And I think because of those things, it's really hard to find a strong opposition argument.
And another like kind of like a related question. So will this measure also put some checks on how many business can be opened? Like, will it check that type of opening of the businesses? Because anybody can like open the business. Like, will it check like how many business license can be given? Will this measure regulate this or not?
Zach, I'll let you.
Sure. So I'll touch just briefly on the last question. We also have commercial cannabis manufacturers, so those make the oils, the lotions, and things like that. As far as the allowance for where and how many businesses can be established, the county at the outset of adopting its regulations took a very, very conservative approach to how many businesses that were going to be allowed in the unincorporated county. And the way they did that is they dictated specific zoning requirements and prerequisites for commercial cannabis businesses to qualify for approval. So for instance, if you're in an ag zone and you want to do cultivation, you have to be located within 2,000 feet of an arterial road or be able to prove ease of access for public safety vehicles to an arterial road to and from your facility. You also have to be in a fire district. And so when you look at the arterial roads in San Joaquin County, there's only a handful of those. And putting all of those prerequisites together, that leaves you with a limited number of properties countywide that would actually qualify for eligibility for approval. Similarly, if you are an industrial facility, you have to be connected to public utilities. So if you don't have a sewer and water connection, unless you're developing a cannabis business park, you have to be connected to sewer and water services and be located again in a specific zone. In the county, it's in limited industrial zone or a general industrial zone. And so looking at the prerequisites and the zoning requirements and also sensitive use setbacks that the state of California has imposed, you have to be at least 600 feet away from a school, a daycare, or a youth facility. Otherwise, you don't qualify, your property will not qualify for commercial cannabis business licensure. So those are the checks and balances. And I will say, speaking from experience representing these businesses over the last 4 years, this is an extremely arduous process to go through to qualify for approval, both on the local and state level. So you have a number of regulatory agencies that you need to comply with their standards and their criteria to qualify for a commercial cannabis business. We're talking about not only the local jurisdictions, the planning department, the sheriff's department, when you talk about security requirements. You have the environmental health department that's looking at prospective environmental impacts of your business and strict standards that you have to meet to qualify on the local level. In order to qualify for a state license, and again, you need both a local approval and a state license to operate your business. If you're a cultivation facility, you're looking to deal with the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the State Water Resources Control Board, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and another few regulatory agencies that need to provide you either certification or approval based on what you submit to them in order for you to jump through all of those hoops and hurdles to receive your state license to operate. If you're a retail business or a distributor or a lab testing facility, again, you're dealing with all of those local agencies that are looking at your application, evaluating you for your conditional use permit. That's the land use entitlement that you have to get on the local level. And on the state level, you're dealing with the Bureau of Cannabis Control within the Department of Consumer Affairs. You're dealing with the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, and it's not easy. When clients come to me and they're looking at investing their money in a commercial cannabis business, unless they're a legacy operator and they're trying to transition into into the commercial side, I always tell them, look, you plan for at least 8 to 12 months, if not longer, a substantial financial investment. You have to be able to lease a property. There's very few property owners that have a conservative portfolio that are willing to lease their properties to these businesses. So more often than not, you're looking at actually coming in and buying a commercial or industrial or an agricultural property just to be able to apply for one of these licenses.
No, but like once like this, the business, like the people gonna see the revenue coming out of this business for sure. Like people will be more inclined to open these businesses. But like my question was more on the retail side. Like for example, you mentioned like the business can only be open like 600 feet away from the school. Like for example, is there any limit on how many business can be open? Like for example, as we have like coffee shops around the corners, right? Can that be a situation that okay, we will have like a cannabis business on every other corner? So will that be any check on that, like how many cannabis businesses or competing cannabis businesses can be open in a city or a town?
Sure. So in San Joaquin County, again, there are no retail storefronts allowed. So there's no public interface with these businesses. It's all they're all closed to the public. There's all security standards that are associated with those. So there's not going to be, I guess, the same sort of security threat or perception thereof that you have when you have a retail storefront operating in different jurisdictions. So as far as the retail is allowed, where you actually have public access to those facilities, there is 0 of those businesses that are going to be allowed in San Joaquin County. Now, again, there's no numerical limitation on the number of businesses that the county may approve. What limits the scope of the industry here are those zoning criteria, those prerequisites for the properties, and those sensitive use setbacks. When you look at those things, if you apply those to a county map, that significantly reduces the number of eligible properties that would qualify. That is the limitation. In other jurisdictions, there are numerical caps on the number of retail businesses, the number of cultivation businesses, manufacturing businesses that local jurisdiction would allow. It varies depending on the local jurisdiction. But in San Joaquin County, retail, 0 is the number.
Yeah, no, adding a little bit to Zach, so this month, 15th, is the deadline to apply for retail licenses in Tracy, and only 4 licenses will be allocated. So it all depends on the city and their jurisdiction, everything. So how many licenses they want to apply and how many applicants they qualify. Because it's a very stringent process, as Zach has mentioned, so lots of agencies are involved. So now, as Christina mentioned, yeah, the opposition. So now I'll just was inclined to ask who supports Measure X, Christina.
We are so thrilled to have a number of leaders who have endorsed this measure. The 3 supervisors who voted to put it on the ballot include Supervisor Villapadua, Supervisor Patty, and Supervisor Miller. Beyond that, the Stockton Mayor, Michael Tubbs, endorses it. And Tracy, both Veronica Vargas and Dan Ariola endorse it. Susan Eggman, Josh Harder, both endorse this measure. We have a lot of nonprofits. So like I mentioned before, Kay Ruthdaller, Executive Director of Family Resource and Referral, she endorses it. Jose Rodriguez from El Concilio, a number of organizations that way, and the organizations that are deeply invested in our community and have really taken the time to understand the impact and feel that this really is the best way forward for our communities and for our children.
Councilwoman Vargas, I believe, endorsed, and Tracy.
Oh, I apologize. I thought that's what I said.
No, thank you. So yeah, so we have good endorsements, and they think the value in Measure X. So, but what will happen in case this Measure X doesn't pass?
This is the most important thing that people need to understand is if Measure X doesn't pass, cannabis businesses will still open in the county. and we will not have the benefit of any of the tax revenue. It's done. Cannabis is here. It is important that we capture this new revenue and put it where it is most important for our community. So if Measure X doesn't pass, and it's going to pass, I can feel it. But if it didn't, we'd still have cannabis. And the first time, so this is actually the second time we've tried to pass this measure. We put a measure like this on the ballot in 2018, and it only missed by 3%. I really feel like being able to come back around this time and get the word out again through great people like you doing this kind of work, we really have a strong opportunity. But you can help us by following us on social media and forwarding emails and getting the word out, because the reality is, if this doesn't pass, cannabis businesses will still open in the county, and we will reap none of the benefit.
Thank you very much, Christina. So, Parminder, do you have anything in mind?
No, I am good. So thank you so much, Christina and Zach, for answering our questions. It was super helpful. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate Christina and Zach. So if you have anything in mind that we may have missed in our discussion, if you want to add something additionally, please.
We will. Thank you so much for having us on. We really appreciate the time to talk to you, and just the obvious investment you've made in your community by producing something like this. This is an incredible resource, and so I just really applaud your efforts.
Yes, similarly, I very much appreciate the opportunity to present, not only on behalf of Measure X, but on behalf of the industry. As you know, there's a stigma associated with the cannabis industry. We'd have to chart our own course over the last 4 years, put our best foot forward in the communities that we want to operate in. And in doing so, we have engaged in philanthropic activities, and we are extremely appreciative to work with Christina, other children's advocates in the Children's Alliance, in working with the community to advance Measure X, because the economic potential for this industry is extremely compelling. And as we can play a part in the improvement of our communities through revenue produced by our businesses, we think that it's the best of both worlds. We have the opportunity to do business in our own communities, support our own families, and support others in need. And so, to Christina's point, cannabis is here. There are many, many illegal businesses operating in and around the county. There are a large number of legal businesses operating on the borders of our county. We're talking about City of Sacramento, Stanislaus County, Rio Vista, Contra Costa County. You go further south, City of Modesto, City of Merced, Atwater. All of these local jurisdictions across the valley, Tracy's moving forward, are taking advantage of participating in this multi-billion-dollar industry statewide, serve to improve their communities, and San Joaquin County should not miss this opportunity. We should take advantage of the economic impact that this industry carries and utilize that potential to benefit our communities. So thank you for the opportunity to present that.
Thank you, Zach. So before we end, so as you are coming from a different domain, as Christina has her own expertise, so I'm pretty sure voters will have the follow-up questions. So I would request, Zach, you first please briefly introduce which background or which domain expertise you are bringing, and if the voters will have follow-up questions, how they can reach out to you to clarify the questions.
Certainly. I'm an attorney, been practicing for about 6 years now, and over the last 4.5 years, my practice is focused exclusively on local and state commercial cannabis licensing, compliance, and local policy reform advocacy, meaning we advocate for the passage of commercial cannabis regulations to allow my clients and others the opportunity to operate legally in our communities. And so if you have any follow-up questions, you can reach me via email. It's zach@dravonconsulting.com. That's the name of my firm, is Dravon Consulting. That's ZACH@DRIVON consulting.com.
Thank you, Zach. And now I'll request Christina to please share her expertise and for the follow-up questions, how the voters can reach out to you for clarification.
Absolutely. So I'm the director of the San Joaquin Children's Alliance, and it's a county-wide organizational effort to advocate in front of the Board of Supervisors for the needs of children and youth. And so I work predominantly with leaders, educators, and nonprofit directors to move that work forward. Right now I'm working pretty heavily on the campaign, so the best way to get a hold of me would be to email yes@x forsanjoaquin.com.
Thank you very much, Christina. And then, Christina, is there any website where the voters can directly go and find the relevant information?
It's just like the email, x4sanjoaquin.com.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you, Zach and Parminder, for being here and for informing the voters. And I'll again request the voters, please and please follow up with your thoughts, with your questions, and make an informed decision for November 3rd. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Have a good
Thank you.